morning, everyone, and welcome to the launch of the Futures of Localization report, Scenarios for Civil Society in 2046, brought to you by the International Civil Society Center. My name is Miriam Gambini, and I am the manager of the Futures of International Civil Society Organizations program at the center. I'm joined today by my colleagues Alexandra Scheger, who will facilitate this session with me, and by our colleague Liz Parsons, who's supporting with tech. So if you are incurring any tech issues, please do not hesitate to reach out to Liz via the Zoom chat. Before we start, also make sure to drop your name and organization in the chat. And we would like to remind you also that this session is being recorded, and that we'll share the recording with participants afterwards. We're pleased today to introduce you to the report on the futures of localization that we produced, which examines the potential futures of civil society through a strategic foresight-driven approach, combining horizon mapping, scenario analysis, community and stakeholder engagement, and strategic stress testing. The report is rooted in our Futures of ICSOs initiative that we launched last year, and that helps organization in implementing the transformational changes needed to become more agile, respond to challenges, and carve future-fitter roles for themselves. Against the challenging and volatile civil society landscape, the center decided to produce this report to gather insights from across civil society and scanning trends, which also includes some of the significant changes that we have seen recently in socioeconomic and political context. And with the current crisis also facing the sector, we really wanted to be able to explore some positive steps and actions that we can collaboratively take to remain agile in the face of adversity, and also look at we can continue with providing the missions that we have as civil society organizations. So for today's launch, we'll have the opportunity to share some of the insights and learning from the research that we produced in the report. We'll also have the opportunity to hear from our consultants some insights from the methodology and the process for the design of the report. And then also hearing a reflection from some of our partners in the stakeholder and community engagement. And in the second part of the session, we'll have the opportunity to have a bit more of an interactive discussion, which you all to look at what these futures for civil society could actually mean in practice. This is aims to be an engaging session, so feel free to drop comments and reflections in the chat throughout the whole session. To share with you the main insights that we gather from the Futures of Localization report. So this report was, as I mentioned, rooted in having the opportunity to engage with civil society organizations, both international and local, in understanding what are some of the transformational changes that are needed, but also in understanding where are the gaps in the use of futures thinking tool and specifically strategic foresight in looking at different approaches for the sector. And also understand how we can help organizations in terms of providing them with tools to anticipate localization and power shift related developments. We host at the center the Scanning the Horizon community, which is a community that convenes foresight practitioners across civil society, funders, and academia to really discuss how strategic foresight is a pivotal for any organizations as a tool to anticipate challenges. And so we really wanted to seize the work that this community has conducted. It also expanded to engage the larger sector in the development and different futures for civil society. And the idea was also to look at the current situation and in the recent years, the developments that have been happening in the sector, and more recently, all the geopolitical and funding also changes, and really understand how the trends that we're driving this change and can be detected, and how a lot of the developments that have been happening in the past 2 years could have been also predicted to an extent. And so it was really important for us to also look not just at the challenges that organizations are facing, but also at understanding what are some of the opportunities that we can seize as a civil society organization to maybe look at alternative ways of doing development cooperation. And so as a starting point for us, it was really key to make sure that we could gather different facets of the civil society ecosystem, and that we could provide organizations with a research that could help look at practicing also the skills that are needed to then detect uncertainty, to look at how can we develop actually some positive framing and narratives for civil society and challenge also some of the assumptions that we might carry, but also to provide a structured way to reflect on the roles, particularly civil society organizations that um, are in dire need of change, and look at what are some of the choices that organizations can make in terms of rethinking their missions and roles. So, as objectives for this report, we really wanted to focus on mapping drives and trends and looking at different forces shaping civil society, but also localization as a phenomenon. Also, surface some of the critical uncertainties that some of the pathways that remain contested when there is a lack of agreement, to develop some scenarios and look at plausible futures that could capture how localization and other developments could evolve, but also look at implications. What do these different scenarios and futures actually mean for different actors, and to also hold space for dialogue to actually understand how we can work together in the sector to achieve some of these plausible futures. And the process that for us was really crucial when strategizing around this report was to make sure that we could have a very participatory and actually intersectional approach. So we really started with looking at our Scanning the Horizon community, but then expanding to doing global consultations and then ad hoc workshops in 3 different regions. And we're very happy today to have some of our partners to share a bit more about the workshops. And the objective was to really ensure that we could have a diverse set of voices to hear in regard to what many actors think that civil society could look like in 30 years. And we really wanted also to capture these different elements. So starting from trend analysis, so looking at different trends, drivers, and weak signals, to use scenario building as a tool to develop then contrasting futures that were really focused around power and resourcing, to then also use backcasting to identify preferable futures backwards to define the steps needed, but also looking at critical gaps and looking at strategic actions that organization can take today to foster the possibilities of these futures, and then to also use the three horizon reflection to map immediate actions and opportunities, and also focus a bit more on the concrete element of future thinking. At the core of this report was really the possibility to develop 4 scenarios. And to develop these scenarios, we focused on 2 key elements to develop a framework for our 2x2 matrix for scenarios. One was around power distribution. So looking at power still centralized in the global north with ICSOs and northern donors versus decentralized, and also look at resourcing models, so scarce resourcing models versus more abundant models that are not just donor-driven, but also are focused on alternative ways of doing financing, such as community philanthropy and the increase of South-South cooperation and diaspora development. And so we ended up developing these four contrasting scenarios across this axis, and it was really important for us to really get a space to delineate these scenarios and look at the implications and opportunities for different actors. The first scenario that we identified, we called it the desert. So it's a scenario where there is a shrinking civic space, where ICSOs are still pretty much central actors for a development, and the power is pretty much still centralized in the north. And this look is also one of looking at civil society that is present in form, but not necessarily in function. The second scenario that we identified in our metrics is called scarce horizon, and we call it that as it represents this still funding quite scarce, but also seeing that civic space is more open and communities are actually mobilizing, but very often still the financial challenges limit the impact that communities might have. So really understanding how innovation is still quite fragile and there is the risk of stagnation and inertia. Then we had a scenario that we developed and called community capital that looks at community really mobilizing and local actors being in the lead, but still the funding situation being quite unstable and unsustainable. Here we see way more space for locally driven dictated agendas, for more participatory decision-making models, and also looking at different examples of organization really embracing change, but still not having safe necessarily structures. And then the fourth scenario that we called resource evolution, that is more aspirational scenario that we have, is the one looking at regenerative civil society ecosystem, where power is decentralized and that where funding is abundant and also diverse. So not just really concentrated in certain areas of the world, and really looks at the future in a way that wants to really be transformational of organization and really be resilient. So as part of these research and the scenarios, when we engage also with community and with the stakeholders to really understand how we could make these futures more possible, we also looked at developing recommendations that can be useful for different actors when looking at futures thinking and when looking at building some of the capacities that are needed to look at different futures. So for civil society organization, the priority for us that we identified was around values. So really looking at understanding how civil society organizations and specifically international civil society organizations can look at changing the roles quite dramatically and moving from the implementation role to being facilitators, to being conveners, just rethink their missions overall. Regarding donors, we looked at how they could also support this power shift and the fostering of local-led development by reforming also financing models and engaging more in trust-based philanthropy, for example, looking at more long-term funding and also investing in other different ways of doing development and of providing resources that we mentioned. For local actors, local civil society organizations, but also movements, we recommended looking at different opportunities for self-determination, really looking at how they could use engagement and collaboration to reduce dependency from international civil society actors and from donors. And then in general, for civil society actors, we really focused on providing recommendations and very specific also pointers in order to embed foresight as a practice that can be embedded at organizational level, not just as one-off exercise, but really being a structured part of strategic analysis in every organization and really engaging in the use of tools such as the one we used in the report, such as scenario development and horizon scanning, and not just internal at organizational level, but also looking at decision making, so engaging with boards, but also with donors, and in order for donors and civil society actors to also keep each other accountable. And then I would like to conclude before I give the word to our consultant, Dr. Manasseh Chiweze, to share some of the main conclusions that we had in the development of this report. Was that it was really keen for different actors across civil society to collaborate in order to dismantle the systems that have not necessarily worked as optimally as they could have, and really invest in different financial ecosystem and integrating foresight in decision-making processes. And then also for organization to understand how crucial it is to move from reaction to anticipation, to prioritize collective action, and really understanding how to promote sustainability for organizations for the year ahead. And I will stop here with the sharing of insights. We'll have the opportunity later to take on some questions or reflections also from the audience. But now I would like to give the word to Dr. Manasseh Chiweze, who was the lead consultant in the development of the report, and who authored and drafted the report together with Dr. Sandra Batahara. She could not be with us today, but we're really happy to have you with us, Manasseh, to tell us a bit more about some of the learnings and highlights from the process and methodology. So over to you, Manasseh.
Thank you, Mariam, for that. I hope everyone can hear me clearly. All right. I have about 5 minutes to just reflect on the presentation that you have given, and also give my own thoughts in terms of some of the issues that came out of this process. I think, firstly, one of the key issues was that from the starting point of this work is the realization that civil society is at a crossroads, and that traditional donor-driven models are under strain, and the calls for localization, decolonization, community leadership are also growing louder within this space. But also questions of power and resources remain central to the questions that we also wanted to look at. So rather than predicting a single future from the presentation that Mariam has given, we set out to also look at the different plausible pathways and what they might mean for international civil society organizations, local actors, and also donors. And I want to focus on three key learnings that came out of the process. As Mariam has already noted, it was also highly participatory. We also got to hear the voices from Latin America, Southeast Asia, and also Africa through different workshops, through different interviews, and also different spaces where we interacted with different actors and spoke to these issues. So the first issue that came out was that localization is not a technical adjustment. Localization has to be seen as a structural and transformative question around governance, legitimacy, and accountability. And many of our participants within the research warned against localization without transformation. And it's something that has stayed with us. And it's important that as we also reflect on what civil society should look like in as we go on in the future, that question of power and decentralization and ensuring that local voices are central to the agenda becomes critical. Then secondly, what we also noticed was that innovation is already underway. There are so many examples of community philanthropy, hybrid financing models that are already being used, South-to-South solidarity and justice-based narratives that are already sort of central to some of the work that is happening. But these are not abstract ideas. They are already happening. But the real issue now is how can we scale them up? How do we absorb them into the way that we're doing business at the moment to transform the way civil society works? So that is the question. How can we learn from what is already happening? What sort of good practices and good examples and case studies can we then draw from to actually then refine the way we work? Then thirdly, is that we also saw that ICSOs need to redefine their value proposition. Across all the scenarios that we spoke about within the report, there needs to be a shift in terms of what international civil society organizations are. Are they going to be implementers and gatekeepers? Are they going to be conveners and facilitators? Are they going to be knowledge brokers? What role then best suits what the future holds in terms of civil society and the localization agenda? So some of these changes do not need to be cosmetic. They actually require fundamental rethinking of governance, funding models, reporting, and organizational culture. And the report also captures a lot of some of these issues and the challenges that come from how we need to rethink and restructure the value of international civil society organizations. The risk is that if change does not happen, we risk being left behind and also being illegitimate in terms of our voice as we go forward. So in ending, I would want to say that the future is not open. It is not neutral. But it requires us to actually rethink and also be very open to looking at how issues of funding, how issues of power, how issues of control affects the local agendas in the different parts of the world that we work. And we need to also understand that decentralizing power without resources will only lead to issues around burnout and fragmentation of local organizations. We need to have that balance in terms of ensuring that also resources are getting to the grassroots. I think I'll end on that and say that whilst there is a lot of anxiety about the future, there are also a lot of possibilities in terms of promoting justice-led and justice-framed development process as we go on. So there's a lot of positivity. There's a lot of issues that we are also seeing as where we can look at and international civil society organizations can work into and also use those as vehicles for change. I think I'll stop there and allow the process to go on. Thank you very much, Mariam.
Thank you, Manasseh, for sharing your highlights and insights. Now we have a bit of time to take some questions. So if you have any questions for Manasseh or on the reports also that I can address, I think this is your opportunity. So just feel free to raise your hand and then I think we can take a couple of questions. Or if you feel comfortable with not speaking, or if you want to share them in the chat, then we can consider that. I see an hand raised. Vanjiro, yes.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'm very happy to be here to listen to this conversation, which we are thinking through together with some colleagues. I come from a civil society background, presently working independently as a researcher. And of course, the question about CSO funding is really critical. And I haven't looked at the report, but I think what Dr. Manasseh has shared touches the heart of it because we're talking about power, funding, and control. One question running through my mind, which isn't fully articulated, is part of the imbalance in funding is rooted in an unjust global financial architecture that is often assumed, and a lot of mainstream funding then won't address this, and so part of the inequality is perpetuated by an unjust system. So, to what extent did this study consider that transformation really comes from confronting that unjust system, and that a collaboration between North and South, South and South to make this happen is critical. And then the second is, how do you envisage localizing this conversation at the country level and at regional levels? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Banjir, for the question. Manasseh, would you like to go first on this?
All right. So I think the first one is maybe more likely within my ballpark in terms of some of the issues in that question. We did factor that within the report, and even our recommendations speak to those issues around how do we deal with the issues of the asymmetries in terms of power and control and resources, and even the different scenarios that we built also alert to this notion that the most probably the most progressive scenario will be one where you have this equal partnership between north-south, or you have more south-to-south collaborations where resources and control is also very much participatory, and you have local communities being involved in terms of the different dimensions of not only programming but also decision making in terms of where to program, how to program, and who to program for. So some of these questions we did highlight them, and we did also warn against a system or a situation where you have more power being given to local organizations, but resources remain within a specific space, or control and decision making remains within those that are funding or those that are donors. So these are questions that we also grappled with within the report, and tried to also highlight the different scenarios that might arise out of that, and also gave recommendations in terms of the best way forward. And from the participants themselves, they also highlighted that notion that localization has to be transformational. It has to be structural. It has to be a point where we say decisions and resources and control is very much a shared and a participatory process between the global north and the global south in this instance. So the report does share that. I think, Mariam, you can help with the second question. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, not much to add from what Manasseh said in terms of the approach that we had in the report. We really wanted to embrace the concrete issues, but really also at systems level. And I think what you said, Vanjira, about also resources design and financial architecture, that's also part of that, or really addressing just also the systemic causes, and not just being myopic in a way of looking at just what organizations can do concretely, but also in the larger system. So that's definitely part of how we approach the scenarios. And in regard to what you said around also localizing, I think that there's still quite a lot of work to be done. We have focused on in the scenarios where localizations was more prominent, let's say, on really understanding how this connection can be made among organizations to really collaborate and engage at local level. And that's something that really comes out in the report. But I think a lot of the work that needs to be done still around really achieving some of the futures will definitely be focused on implementing localization in a scale, and in really having opportunities for local actors to be empowered and to build capacity around these issues like foresight and organizational sustainability. Then I think we have a question still. We can take one more question, and then we'll have to move to the other part of the session. So, Jakub?
Hello, everybody, and thank you for this excellent presentation. I wanted to ask if you also considered evidence as a part of the power when you looked into and you were kind of doing the framework, and because in our view, communities often lead and increasingly more lead the change, but the evidence still stays away from them, and so in our view, evidence, the communities holding and being able to effectively use and leverage the evidence and owning it and trusting it is really key in that power component. So I was just curious if you looked into it as well as a part of your research. Thank you.
Yes. Manasseh, do you want or do you want me to?
All right. I think I'll just say something around that. Uh, what usually happens is that when we're looking at evidence and especially documenting development work, as you are rightly saying, that at times what you have is a scenario where there's a lot of extraction of information and knowledge goes outside the communities, and it does not return to the communities themselves, so that they use that evidence to actually then rethink and think about their own scenarios and circumstances. What usually happens is that decision makers elsewhere look at that evidence, use it in terms of planning and for further programming. So we did talk about that, but not as openly as that. But we did really focus on critiquing systems where you have a compliance-heavy system that undermines local agency, that keeps local actors as implementers only and not decision makers. Because if they attend to decision makers, then that notion of ensuring that evidence stays within the communities becomes very important in terms of helping communities then make these decisions. Mariam.
Yeah, thanks, Manasseh. And I think just complementing to what you said, I think when we looked at the power dimensions, we were really also keen to, again, not just look at strategy, decision making, resources, but also these other elements around knowledge, around who sets the decision, also in terms of capacity and other elements. So we really tried to embrace different elements of power dynamics and not just focus on one element or the other. So definitely also evidence, and I think also in general knowledge brokering was also part of that. Okay, thank you so much for also your questions. And I also see there are a lot of really interesting reflection in the chat. So I can just also encourage you to keep on commenting. I think it's great to have this conversation around these themes. Now we'll hand over to my colleague Alex to introduce our next contributor. Over to you, Alex.
Thank you, Miriam, and also thank you, Manasseh, for sharing the highlights from the report. I'd like now to welcome Farouk Al-Hassan from the West Africa Civil Society Institute, short WACSI. WACSI did some regional workshops that also led to the scenario report with different stakeholders in the West African region. And Farouk is also a part of our Scanning the Horizon community, which Miriam already introduced quickly beforehand. And yeah, we'd like now to hear some reflections from the workshops from Farouk, how it was, how this contributed to the scenario report. So yeah, Farouk, over to you.
Thanks so much, Alex, and good afternoon, everyone. It's been a great pleasure for us from WACSI. WACSI, we are based in Accra, Ghana. And then as part of our work, it is to support civil society organizations across the West Africa region, including other countries. So we work beyond West Africa. So we happen to participate in the Foresight and Anticipating Future workshop with the International Civil Society Center somewhere in November 2023. And this has been one of the highlighted events for us, because we have been also talking about and thinking about futures thinking and foresight. So the event was kind of a quick reflection for us to know that, yes, we are not about anticipating, or we are not about predicting future, but we want to think ahead so that when things happen, we don't just get surprised and we say, oh, we didn't see this one coming. So what we did after our participation in this workshop was to ensure that we embed the learning we have acquired from the the workshop with our partners, because we didn't want to also keep this knowledge to only WAXI. So we have to extend it to all our partners that we've been working with in the West Africa region. And one key thing that we did after the workshop was our regional workshop that we organized with some partners with funding from OSF in Cote d'Ivoire. Cote d'Ivoire, where we brought about, I think, 5 to 6 countries from the Francophone side. And the workshop was on resource mobilization and organizational sustainability. So we used the opportunity to also introduce the foresight and anticipating future toolkit. And this toolkit was really welcomed by all the participants at the workshop, because it exposed them to be thinking ahead, to be thinking about possibility that could happen in this ecosystem of civil society that we all find ourselves. So the same exercise was also done in the Anglophone part of West Africa, where participants also came from Liberia, Sierra Leone, Ghana, Nigeria, and what have you. So we have been able to really share this knowledge across our network and our system, because our participants really embrace it. And currently we are implementing a program in Ghana. The program is being funded by Comic Relief and FCDO, called Shifting the Power Program. And we use the opportunity during our various training to also show this toolkit, the future thinking and the foresight to our participants, so that they are also able to apply the knowledge. They are also able to apply the skills and then the experiences in their day-to-day activity. So there were a lot of elements in the toolkit. One of them, or those that we have really used, was the trend card. So the trend card is one approach where you open up the call, or you open up the discussion with your participant to look at what is happening now and then what is likely to happen, looking at the situation that we have at hand, right? So using the trend card, participants were able to look beyond and say that this is likely to happen. In fact, some of the feedback we got was like the current issue of military taking over in some of the African countries could have been foreseen ahead of time, where CSOs could have engaged government and other institutions to let them know that the way things are happening, the trajectory at which things are going, this is likely to happen. Then people can take measures and avoid it to happen. So it's not about predicting, but it's about knowing, it's about anticipating, it's about looking ahead, so that when things are likely to happen, you are already aware, and then you are able to adjust yourself and strategize yourself effectively. We also did the same exercise with some of our partners in Senegal, where we have a training with them, and we also expose them to this use of the toolkit. And over there, we use the feature wheels. The feature wheels is also another approach where participants or stakeholders can also look into future and prepare themselves, so that when things happen, they don't get surprised about it, but they already know that things like this could happen, and then they can take some measures to prepare themselves from it affecting their sustainability. And one of the findings that we've got is, in fact, the US aid cut should have been seen it. We should have seen it coming, because the way funding changes in terms of support from donors were coming, people could have seen that there's a possibility that any donor could withdraw at any time. And then in that regard, what are some of the measures that, as civil society organization, you are putting in place, so that when those things happen, you are not just surprised, but you have measures, you have some of the mitigation, to be able to overcome the challenges. And this is one of the key things that we are doing at WAXI, and we're also encouraging our partners across West Africa to adopt, in terms of diversifying their sources of funding, and in terms of looking beyond the current funding that they have, and also make sure that they embrace this future thinking and then foresight. So in general, the lesson we've learned is we don't predict tomorrow, but we can anticipate on things that happen, and then it is a learning process where participants can use different toolkits. The toolkit is very rich with a lot of scenarios, a lot of approaches that you can use. And just to end is that in that same toolkit that we also really appreciated from the ICSOs, some of the warm-up that are found in, as you also facilitate some of your training, you have some kick activity that you can also do and to help your participants really pay attention and also energize them to focus on the work that you are doing. So generally, that has been our experience in our participation in the foresight and then anticipating futures activity. And we know that it's been very helpful to us as an organization, and then it's also been very helpful to all our partners that we have been working with. So that is what I would like to share from our side. And if there is any question or any comment, we welcome them, and then we'll be glad to contribute to the discussion. Over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Farouk, for sharing kind of these insights and processes, how WACC kind of collaborates. And I think it's also a wonderful example of the collaboration within the sector in using foresight and futures work. So yeah, thank you for sharing. Are there any particular questions for Farouk at this stage? Okay, if not, then looking at the time, we'll already move to our interactive part because we only have like a couple of 15 minutes left. And we, of course, also want to know who's in the room and what are your thoughts about the scenario report. So Liz, could I please ask you to share the Slido survey? So yeah, in the chat you should see now a link which I would like you to please open and then already answer our first question. That's basically just to get to know who's really in the room with us today. So if you're from an ICSO or local organization, a foundation, academic institution, or even another institution we didn't list here, you can specify this in the chat. And also, Liz, if you could please share the screen that we can all see the answer. Wonderful. Thank you, Liz. So yeah, we can already see most of you for now are from ICSOs. So yeah, wonderful to see. Also, I mean, I already saw some of you introduced yourself in the chat. So yeah, let's move on to the next question. Oh, wonderful. Now we see it clearly. Perfect. So to dive into the content, which of the 4 scenarios presented in the report do you feel are most likely to materialize looking at the future in 2046, so in 20 years? Just to quickly repeat, we had the desert, which is closed civic space, very little funding, local groups struggle to survive. ICSOs are mostly in the control of resources. The second scenario is scarce horizon. There we have a kind of more flourishing civic space, but there's not enough stable funding, and it's focused still on kind of short-term projects with local groups being active, but mostly dependent. The third one, community capital, was about being that the power is mostly lying with local communities. We have strong grassroots actions, but there's still limited funding. And ICSOs act as partners, not as leaders. And then there's the fourth, more aspirational scenario, the desert, where power is decentralized to local actors, where there's sufficient funding and diverse funding and strong collaboration and trust, and ICSOs are merely there for supporting and connecting and not for controlling. So I see already a couple of you voted. That's interesting to see. Most of you, Scarce Horizon is catching up, but most of you so far voted for community capital. I mean, if there's also, if you want to expand on your choice, you can also drop this into the comments. Why you chose one of these scenarios in particular, but I think it's it's kind of hopeful to see that not one of the first two scenarios is kind of winning in our voting, and that people are still a bit optimistic about the future, and that the third scenario could materialize most likely. So yeah, then jumping to the next question. So our third questions would be, if resources were scarce, what would be your priority? I think that's a question most can already kind of identify with. We are currently living in an era where resources are already quite scarce. So yeah, please answer with 1 or 2 words. What's your priority? Already seeing a couple of answers coming up. Yeah, collaboration is definitely a key theme also for us, also what we already highlighted in our scenario report, how the scenario report came about. It's also collaboration, where we're really grateful to partner with so many different stakeholders in the civil society sector. We also see flexible funding models. So for sure, funding will be a crucial part of of kind of developing in the next years. Complementarity, solidarity is also one thing we always hear from partners, that especially in kind of harsh times, we need to show solidarity towards each other. But there's also a lot of different other words. If anyone wants to come off mic and just quickly jump in and explain one of their priorities and what it means to them, that would be nice. You can just directly come off. Yeah, Vanjuro?
Yes, Alexandra. Thank you. On this question, I struggled a bit. Because I come from the school of thought linked to the first question I asked, that resources aren't scarce, they are unequally distributed, and there is resource extraction through forms of greenwashing and, in the trades and other sectors. And so really what I was asking is, as we look at the future of civil society, the transformation comes from transforming unjust extraction and those inequalities. So that the development paradigm has to go. It doesn't work, it's failed. So I like the idea that we need the collaboration, but it's to look at a new transformation. So not having looked at the report, I'm sure it's been discussed, but the question as asked misses the bigger question. For instance, polycrisis is a word cobbled by the IMF that ignores this dynamic. So for me, I'm feeling let's not miss the critical issue. We are seeing amazing examples in Ghana, in West Africa, of Africa Agency, where governments are saying we will not respect those unjust extractive trade agreements and all of that. And then there are threats of military action. So really, we are talking about resources and power at the most fundamental level. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I feel this question misses that. But I think there's space I believe there's space for discussion and to really ground it in our reality as from the South perspective. Thank you.
Definitely wonderful. Thank you for sharing your insights. And I mean, that's also part of this launch, that we really want to hear your thoughts on this, also critical thoughts. So really thank you for highlighting this and reflecting on this. So yeah, that's definitely one big issue. Yeah, moving forward, also with the next question, the question is, what is one concrete action your organization could take in the next year to prepare for any of these futures? So when we are speaking about being proactive, I mean, not predicting, but really preparing for the future, what's one concrete action we can already do today? And also, if someone wants to come off mic and explain, you're very welcome to. So we see enterprise development would be one thing, sharing resources, assets. What we also hear a lot, invest in digital and social movement building. So also to not miss out on the digital sphere. Yeah, technology, adding to this, funding diversification, invest in partnerships, build alliances. So also coming back to the collaboration aspect again. Yeah, so we see a lot about collaboration, resource localization. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Let go. That's also that's maybe a more critical one. But yeah, if anyone wants to share on this and elaborate further, please do so. I can also see some comments in the chat, so please also keep the conversation going in the chat. Anyone wants to quickly speak on their thoughts about the concrete action they could take? Steven?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much. This is Steven from LUCMEF. LUCMEF is Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Foundation in Boya, Cameroon. Regarding, sorry that I came in late, so I missed a good part of the conversation. And I would really solicit to have a report that could help us later. So just to add that in preparation for the future, LUCMEF, through the LAC-SODEC concept, which is the LUCMEF Africa Civil Society Development Center that we have established. A few years back, we started running the Impact Conference, which is bringing together local civil societies and building our capacities in areas of collaboration and partnerships at the local level. We think that this is very important and going to be vital for the future, because if we learn to work together already, this is a way that we can already mitigate the issue of resource effective management of meager resources. So next week, we're having a conference that will bring together almost about 100 local civil society organizations in Cameroon, mainly in the Northwest and Southwest region, in Bamenda, for a 2-day workshop on resource mobilization, and also looking at the localization and area-based coordination, which is the new model that is taking over the OCHA-led cluster system. So we think that this kind of things I think that we're already working on and building for the future. Thank you, and over.
Thank you, Stephen, for your input. And also looking at the chat, thank you for clarifying, Doris, that it was not meant in a negative way to let go, but yeah, really appreciate all your thoughts coming in. Just quickly looking at the time, we only have a couple of minutes left. So thank you for sharing all your thoughts, your reflections on this, and we're also looking forward to engage more with you in the future on this. As we shared, the full report is now online, so you can not just read the brief report, but also the full report with the process, the methodology, the scenarios, everything shared in one place. We can also drop it into the chat again. And for now, we'd like to ask you to fill out a quick poll in the Zoom window, which should hopefully open now. Exactly. So yeah, thank you everyone again for for contributing, also to Manasseh and your colleague Sandra, who couldn't be with us today, unfortunately, but thank you both for your great work on this. Thank you, Farouk and West Africa Civil Society Institute for contributing to the scenarios and sharing the process with partners and making this such a kind of diverse collaboration to come up with these scenarios. And then, we will see how the next 20 years will materialize. As said, it's not to predict the future, but really to prepare for it, to embed foresight and future thinking more into our daily work, and to be further strengthened and prepared. So thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a good rest of the day. Bye.